The wagon wheel struck a stone and jarred her spine. Evelyn Grace clutched the side rail, the Bible in her lap bouncing with emotion. Dust rolled like smoke through the air, turning the sunset into blood. The driver spat, jerked the reins, and muttered that this was as far as he'd go. She looked out, a sagging fence, a barn tilting like a drunk against the dying light, and a house that seemed to be holding its breath. No sign of life. "This Hollow Creek?" she asked, her voice small. The driver squinted past the brim of his hat. "That's what the map says, ma'am. Man named Boone runs it. Or used to." "Used to." The words lodged deep. She stepped down, the hem of her pale dress brushing the dust. The stagecoach rolled away, wheels whining, until the sound was swallowed by the wind. Only silence remained. Silence, and the dry scrape of the barn door shifting in the breeze. "Hello," she called, her voice trembling into the emptiness. A crow flapped from the roof, scattering straw and dust, its cry cutting through the still air. No answer. Evelyn walked toward the house, her boots crunching over brittle weeds. She could smell the dryness, the long neglect. Then, a soft creak behind her. She turned sharply. A small figure stood by the water trough, bare feet in the dust, holding a tin cup in both hands. A little girl, hair the color of hay, eyes wide with something between fear and wonder. "Are you the angel?" the girl whispered. Evelyn froze. I'm no angel, child. I'm looking for Red Mesa Homestead. Is this it?" The girl shook her head slowly, then smiled, a strange, knowing smile. "God finally brought you to us." Before Evelyn could answer, a low metallic click broke the air. "Step away from her." The voice came from the porch. A man stood there, half in shadow, a shotgun resting easy in his hands. His face was hard, unshaven, eyes narrow beneath the brim of a black hat. Evelyn lifted her hands slightly, her heart pounding in her throat. "I mean no harm, sir. The stage left me here by mistake." "Stage don't make mistakes," he said. "Only people do." The little girl turned toward him. "Pa, she ain't bad." "She." "Inside, Clara." The girl didn't move. "I said inside." His tone wasn't loud, but it carried iron. Evelyn watched the child obey, running toward the porch and slipping past him through the door. The man didn't lower the gun. "Who are you?" he asked. "Evelyn Grace," she said. "I came from Missouri. I was to be married to a Mr. Jeb Larkin of Red Mesa Homestead." His eyes flickered at the name. "Larkin." The word was bitter. "That's down the valley. Other side of the ridge." "I see," she said softly. "Then the driver left me wrong." "Seems so." For a long moment, neither moved. The wind carried the smell of old wood and distance. "I'd appreciate a drink of water before I go," she said at last. He nodded once, still wary. "Trough's clean enough." She went to it, dipped her hands into the cold water, and felt the sting of life against her skin. As she drank, she saw the man's reflection behind her. The worn coat, the holster empty at his side, the way his hands never fully relaxed. "You're welcome to rest a spell," he said finally. "Sun'll be gone soon. No safe road after dark." "Thank you." He turned toward the barn, muttering something about feed and chores. Evelyn hesitated by the door, uncertain, then followed the faint glow of lamplight inside. The house smelled of wood smoke and quiet. A table scarred by years of use. 2 chairs, a hearth with dying embers. And on the mantel, a single faded photograph of a woman holding a child, the same child she'd just seen. "Your wife?" Evelyn asked gently when he came in. He didn't answer, just hung his hat on the peg and loaded shells into the shotgun. Clara peeked from the corner, watching Evelyn with wide eyes. "You look like Mama," she said suddenly. Evelyn felt her breath catch. "Do I?" Clara nodded solemnly. She had a white dress, too, when she left. "Clara," the man warned, but his voice broke a little at the edge. Evelyn knelt beside the girl, smoothing her tangled hair. "That's a pretty name," she said softly. The child smiled shyly, then slipped her small hand into Evelyn's. "Stay, please." Evelyn looked up at the man, at Silas Boone, though she didn't know his name yet. The look in his eyes wasn't anger anymore. It was exhaustion and something she recognized too well, loss. I'll stay till morning, she said. He nodded, silent approval, and sat at the table. The lamplight threw shadows across his face, making him look older than he was. Evelyn found bread on the counter, stale but edible, and began to warm it by the fire. Her hands shook from the cold, or maybe from the weight of everything unsaid. Clara sat on the floor beside her, tracing circles in the dust with her finger. I prayed, she whispered. Evelyn glanced down. Prayed for what? For God to send Mama back. The words hit like a hammer wrapped in silk. Evelyn's throat tightened. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's cheek. Maybe, she said, her voice trembling, God send someone different instead. Someone who needs a home just as much. The fire cracked, sending sparks up the chimney. Silas lifted his eyes to her for the first time, as if hearing something he hadn't allowed himself to believe in years. Outside, the wind rose, carrying the sound of a horse's distant snort. Faint, then gone. Evelyn glanced toward the window, the night pressing in against the glass. A figure might have been out there, or maybe only a shadow moving across the ridge. She didn't ask. The meal was quiet, 3 souls eating bread in silence. When Clara finally nodded off by the fire, Evelyn lifted her gently, carried her to a small bed, and tucked her in. The girl's tiny hand found hers in sleep, holding tight, refusing to let go. From the doorway, Silas spoke low. You should sleep too. Dawn comes hard here. I will, she whispered. Thank you for letting me stay. He nodded once, the way men do when they don't trust their own voice. Evelyn sat by the fire long after he'd gone to his room. She stared at the flames licking the wood, at the photograph on the mantel. The woman's eyes in that faded image seemed to watch her, kind, knowing, almost relieved. Outside, the wind moaned through the fences. The stars looked close enough to touch. Evelyn closed her eyes and whispered a prayer she hadn't spoken since Missouri. Not for her safety, but for the child who had called her Mama. And far beyond the flicker of firelight, up on the ridge, a man on horseback watched the little house. His cigarette burned like a red eye in the dark before vanishing into the night. The wrong bride had come, but Hollow Creek had been waiting. The hammer cracked against wood, echoing across the yard. Evelyn steadied the fence post with her boot as Silas drove the nail home. The morning sun was fierce, burning through the haze, the air thick with dust and sweat. Hold it steady, he muttered. I am, she said, gripping harder. The board creaked, but held. They worked in silence, the rhythm of hammer and breath filling the space where words didn't fit. Clara sat nearby on a wagon wheel, humming softly, her small hands combing the mane of a ragged doll. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of sage and smoke from somewhere far off. When the final nail bit deep, Silas lowered the hammer and leaned on the post. That's the last of M, he said. For now. Evelyn wiped her brow, the sweat streaking pale dust down her cheek. Won't stop coyotes, but it'll hold. He gave a short nod. Coyotes don't bother me much. It's the men that do. Her eyes flicked up. Men. He didn't answer right away, just turned his gaze toward the hills beyond the ranch, a low roll of yellow grass and red rock. Something in the way he watched them said the ghosts he spoke of weren't buried yet. They carried their tools back to the barn. The place smelled of dry hay and rust. A half-mended saddle hung from a beam, the leather cracked and flaking. Evelyn brushed her hand over it, the initials SB carved into the strap. Yours? She asked. Used to be, he said, hanging his coat on nail. Don't ride much anymore. She could feel his eyes on her as she moved through the dust-moted light. Her pale dress was already turning brown with work, her sleeves rolled, her hands roughened. There was no trace of the woman who had stepped off that wagon in white. Clara appeared at the doorway, holding a tin cup. Mama Eve, water? The name caught Silas off guard. His jaw tightened. Evelyn smiled faintly, taking the cup. Thank you, darling. He turned away, hiding something behind his stillness. Later that afternoon, they rode into town. Evelyn sitting tall on a borrowed horse, Silas beside her, his shotgun laid across his saddle. The town was a strip of boardwalk and dust, Dry Creek. As they approached, heads turned. Men paused at the blacksmith's. Women stared from the general store. "That her?" someone whispered. "The wrong bride." Evelyn kept her chin high, though she felt the heat of their stares. Silas tied the horses outside the store. "Won't be long," he said. Inside, the smell of coffee and grain filled the air. The clerk behind the counter, a wiry man with spectacles, gave a cautious nod. "Afternoon, Boone." His eyes drifted to Evelyn. "Don't recall you bringing company before." "She's staying a while," Silas said flatly. Before the man could respond, a voice broke through the murmurs, slick, slow, and mocking. "Well, I'll be damned." The widow bride herself. Evelyn turned. A tall man leaned against a post near the doorway. Clean vest, sharp boots, smile, too sure of itself. "Jeb Larkin." "I believe you were expected at my place, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat with a sneer. "Stage dropped you wrong, I heard. Or maybe you just changed your mind." Evelyn met his eyes. "The mistake wasn't mine, Mr. Larkin, but I'm where I need to be." He laughed, low and ugly. "You sure about that? Folks around here don't take kindly to Boone's kind. Man's bad luck, carries death like dust on his boots." Silas's hand hovered near his belt. Not on a gun, but the motion was enough. The room stilled. Larkin straightened, smirk fading. "Didn't mean nothing by it," he said, raising both hands. "Just looking out for the lady." Evelyn's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "If looking out for me means insulting the man who gave me shelter, you can keep your concern." Larkin blinked. The clerk coughed awkwardly. Silas turned, dropped coins on the counter, and walked out without another word. Evelyn followed. Outside, the wind whipped through the street, carrying grit that stung her eyes. She could feel every gaze burning her back as they mounted and rode off. When they reached the ridge overlooking Hollow Creek, the sun was lowering, bleeding gold into the valley. Evelyn exhaled, shaking. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Silas's jaw worked. "He's been trouble since the day he bought that land. Thinks he can scare me off what's left of mine." She looked out across the valley, one side green with crops, the other dry and broken. "He's already taken half." He nodded, "and he aims for the rest." They rode the last mile in silence. The sound of the wind through the grass was the only conversation. That night, Evelyn set supper on the table, beans, bread, a bit of jerky. Clara said grace in a whisper. Silas ate with the quiet discipline of a soldier. When Clara went to bed, Evelyn lingered by the fire. The glow caught the edge of her face, soft but haunted. "Was she like her?" Evelyn asked. Silas looked up. "Who?" "Your wife." He stared into the flames, jaw tight. "No." She was louder. "Meaner. Sometimes." Laughed more than she should have. He paused. "She died when they came for the herd. Men like Larkin, only hungrier." "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be." His eyes flicked to her. "You didn't pull the trigger." Silence settled, heavy as ash. Then he asked, almost reluctant, "Why'd you come all this way for a man you never met?" She smiled sadly. "Because I was tired of being a ghost in someone else's house." Outside, the coyotes began to howl. The wind rattled the loose shutter. Silas rose, checked the rifle by the door, and stepped onto the porch. Evelyn followed, drawn by the unease crawling up her spine. The moon was high, the land silver and still. Then a sound. A single gunshot cracked through the night. The horses screamed from the corral. Silas ran, Evelyn on his heels. The smell hit first, iron and smoke. Her old mare, the one that carried her here, lay in the dust, a bullet through its neck. Pinned to the saddle was a scrap of paper, the words scrawled in black ink. "You don't belong here, widow." Evelyn's hands trembled as she read it. The world felt suddenly smaller, darker. Silas tore the note from the leather and crushed it in his fist. His voice was a low growl. "Larkin." The wind gusted, carrying the word into the dark. Evelyn looked at him, at the rage simmering just beneath his calm. "What will you do?" she asked. He didn't answer, just stared toward the ridge where fireflies flickered in the distance, or maybe torchlight. Evelyn turned toward the little house where Clara slept and felt something cold move through her chest. The ghosts of Hollow Creek had stirred again, and this time they were coming for the living. The first shot shattered the window. Evelyn hit the floor, glass raining around her like ice. Clara screamed from the bedroom. Outside, hooves thundered, a dozen men or more, shouting over the crack of rifles. The night was burning alive. "Stay down," Silas barked, snatching his gun from the wall. He ducked beneath the windowsill, fired once, the recoil echoing through the small house. A man fell screaming outside. Another shouted, "Burn him out." Evelyn crawled across the floor, dragging Clara into the corner behind the table. The little girl trembled, clutching her ragged doll against her chest. The smell of kerosene crept through the cracks. "Silas," Evelyn whispered, "they're going to—" He fired again. "I know." A bottle crashed against the porch. Flames licked up the railing, orange light dancing across the room. The fire caught the roof eaves, snapping and popping like kindling in hell. "Take her to the cellar," Silas said. "Go." Evelyn pulled Clara toward the trapdoor near the hearth. Smoke already coiled through the air. Her hand shook, but her voice was steady. "Down there, sweetheart. Don't come up till I call." Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. "Mama Eve, go." She lowered the child into the dark and shut the door tight. When she turned back, Silas was bleeding from his shoulder, his breath ragged. He knelt by the window, reloading. "There are too many," she said. He gave her a grim smile. "Ain't the first time I've been outnumbered." Outside, the voices drew closer. A silhouette moved through the smoke. Jeb Larkin, his hat tilted low, torch in hand. "Boone," he bellowed. "You should have sold when you had the chance." Silas fired, splintering the post beside him. "You come take it, coward." Evelyn's hands hovered over the rifle leaning against the wall. Her reflection flickered in the firelight. The pale dress, the ash streaking her face. Her heart hammered like a drum. "Silas," she said quietly, "let me." He turned, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "I can shoot," she said. "Better than most men. My husband." Her breath caught on the name. "He taught me." For a moment, silence, save for the fire's hungry hiss. Then he tossed her a revolver. "Then earn your keep." The world shrank to the click of the hammer and the breath before each shot. Evelyn rose, sighted through the shattered window, and fired. A man spun backward into the dirt. Another torch flew, crashing through the barn's open doors. The hay went up in a roar. Smoke poured thick, choking. Silas limped toward the door, blood soaking his sleeve. Evelyn caught his arm. "You can't let him torch everything." She followed him out into the inferno. The night sky blazed red, the barn engulfed, cattle scattering in blind panic. Men on horseback circled like wolves. Evelyn took the rifle from Silas's back. "Cover the flank," she ordered. Her voice had changed. No tremor, no fear. Just the tone of someone who'd been in a battle before. He obeyed without argument. She knelt in the dirt, steadying her aim. Each shot came measured, cold. One horse dropped, its rider tumbling. Another man fell with a scream, torch rolling from his hand. Larkin cursed from behind his horse. "Shoot the damn woman!" Bullets ripped through the smoke. One grazed her arm, tearing fabric, drawing blood. She didn't flinch. She loaded, fired again. Larkin's man crumpled near the well. Silas stumbled, hit in the leg, collapsing behind a trough. Evelyn ran to him, dragging him against the wall of the burning barn. "You stay with me," she hissed. He grinned through the pain. "You fight like a devil in a dress. Then pray the devil doesn't tire." The fire reached the roof, boards collapsing in showers of sparks. Heat seared her skin. She could hear Clara crying faintly from beneath the floorboards. "Silas," she said, her voice breaking, "we can't hold it." He reached for her hand, squeezed. "Go to her." "No," she said, shaking her head. "We finish this." The words came like steel. She stood, raised the rifle once more, and walked into the open yard, smoke curling around her like a veil. Larkin saw her through the haze. "You think you scare me, widow," he shouted. She raised the rifle to her shoulder. "No," she said. "I came to end you." He drew his revolver, fired. The bullet ripped past her ear. She took one breath, one heartbeat, and fired back. Larkin jerked, staggered, dropped to his knees. The torch fell from his hand, sputtering in the dirt. He looked up at her in disbelief, clutching his chest as blood spread through his vest. Evelyn lowered the rifle slowly. The flames behind her painted her white dress in gold and red, like an angel forged from fire. The last of his men broke and ran, vanishing into the desert night. Silas dragged himself forward, coughing, eyes wide at the sight of her. "It's done," he rasped. She knelt beside him, pressing her scarf to his wound. The firelight flickered over both their faces, smoke, sweat, and something unspoken between them. "I thought you said you were a bride," he whispered. "I was," she said softly, "but I was a soldier first." The barn collapsed behind them, a thunder of embers and ash. Evelyn helped him to his feet, half carrying him toward the house. The flames licked across the porch, devouring wood and memory alike. She kicked open the cellar door, pulled Clara up into her arms. The girl's eyes were wide, face streaked with soot. "Mama Eve, it's over," Evelyn whispered. "It's over now." They stood together, framed by the burning remains of Hollow Creek. The air shimmered with heat and the acrid scent of smoke. Evelyn looked back at what was left, the place that had been both a mistake and a salvation. In the distance, dawn began to rise, thin light cutting through the haze. Clara tugged at her sleeve. "Will the house come back?" Evelyn looked toward the sun. "Maybe. Things that are meant to live find a way." Behind them, Silas leaned on his rifle, watching her through the smoke. He knew then, this woman, the stranger in white, had come not by accident but by providence. Evelyn stood in the ashes, wind lifting her hair, her face calm in the ruin. The wrong bride had come and saved them all. The wind howled through Hollow Creek like a mourning hymn, scattering ash across the blackened pasture. Smoke clung low to the earth, twisting around the hooves of restless horses and the charred remains of a life nearly stolen. The ranch was nothing but a graveyard of wood and memory now, except for the faint cry of a child and the glint of a rifle barrel catching morning light. Clara stood in the ruins, her white dress smeared with soot and blood. The hem fluttered in the wind like a torn flag. The Winchester in her hands looked too heavy for her small frame, but her grip never wavered. Across the field, for riders were closing in, black silhouettes against a gold dawn. Their laughter carried across the open plain, sharp and cruel. "Come on out, preacher's woman," one of them hollered, his voice rough as gravel. "You done took something that ain't yours." Clara didn't answer. She just shifted her stance, steady as stone, eyes narrowing under the shadow of her hat. A small hand clutched at her skirt. Lila, the little girl with tear-streaked cheeks and smoke in her hair. Clara knelt beside her, never taking her eyes off the riders. "You stay behind me, sweetheart," she whispered. "No matter what happens, you don't move till I say." Lila nodded, trembling. "They killed Pa." "I know," Clara murmured, her jaw tight. "But they won't hurt you again." The riders fanned out, circling like wolves around a wounded doe. Their leader, Jeb Crowley, tall, scarred, with a revolver that gleamed cruelly, rode closer. He pulled the reins, his horse snorting in the smoke. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, grinning. "The bride they sent to the wrong ranch. Heard you was some mail-order fool. Didn't figure you for the fighting kind." Clara raised a rifle. "I buried 2 sons in the war," she said quietly, "and I put a bullet in the man who sent them there. Don't you call me fool." Crowley's grin faded. The other men shifted uneasily. Something in her voice, cold and certain, stirred an old fear in them, the kind that comes from facing something righteous. Then everything happened at once. Crowley's hand twitched toward his gun. The crack of Clara's rifle split the morning air. His hat flew off, and he reeled back with a curse, clutching his bleeding ear. The others fired in panic, bullets tearing through the smoke and the burned fence rails. Clara dropped behind a fallen beam, returning shot for shot, each round precise as prayer. Lila screamed as splinters exploded near her. Clara turned, eyes burning, and pulled the girl close. "Stay down, honey." One of the outlaws, skinny, wild-eyed, charged forward on foot, shotgun raised. Clara spun and fired before he could aim. The blast threw him backward, landing hard in the mud, his weapon tumbling from limp fingers. The sound echoed down the hollow, and then silence. Crowley stood alone now, breathing hard. Smoke coiled around him like a serpent. "You got fire in you, lady," he growled, voice shaking with rage. "But you can't stop what's coming. That land's cursed, and everyone who touches it dies." Clara stepped from the cover, the rifle still leveled. "Then I'll haunt it till my last breath." They stared at each other, two ghosts of different kinds, one born of sin, one of grace. Crowley went for his gun. Clara's shot found him first. He dropped to his knees, shock frozen on his face, then fell face first into the dirt. The wind took his hat and carried it toward the creek where the fire had begun. For a long moment, all that could be heard was the crackle of smoldering embers and the soft sobs of the little girl. Clara finally lowered the rifle. Her hands trembled. She looked down at Crowley's still body, then up toward the horizon. The rising sun painted the sky blood orange, light breaking through the smoke like mercy after wrath. Lila crept to her side and slipped her small hand into Clara's. "You came 'cause God sent you," she whispered. Clara's eyes shimmered, tears cutting through the ash on her cheeks. "Maybe he did," she said softly. "Maybe he just didn't tell me where I was going to." From the ridge beyond the ranch, riders appeared. Neighbors, ranchers, townsfolk drawn by the smoke. Among them was the sheriff, his badge dull with dust, his eyes wide at the sight below. He dismounted, stepping carefully through the ruin until he stood before Clara. "Heard the Crowley gang was headed this way," he said, voice low. "Didn't figure they'd meet their end here." Clara nodded, weary. They took more than they could ever pay for. The sheriff glanced at the bodies, then at the little girl clinging to Clara's dress. "You ain't from here, are you?" "No," she said, "but it seems this place needed a woman who knows loss." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Ma'am, I reckon this ranch could use a new start. If you're willing to—" Clara looked around. The scorched earth, the broken fences, the house reduced to embers. She thought of the husband who never came for her, the son she'd buried, the prayers unanswered. And then she looked down at Lila, the child holding on to her like she'd found home at last. Clara gave a small, tired smile. "Guess God brought me where I was needed." That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, the wind carried the faint chime of the ranch bell. Folks in town would tell the story for years. The stranger in white who came to the wrong ranch, who stood against the ghosts of Hollow Creek, and who saved a child when no man could. They'd say she wasn't lost after all. They'd say she was sent. And on quiet nights, when the wind sighed through the grass and the stars burned over the valley, you could almost hear a child's voice whisper from the porch of that rebuilt home, "God finally brought you to us."